The 2026 NBA draft depth got absolutely decimated by guys returning to school and betting on themselves. Today, we're running through three of the most crucial returners that you have to keep an eye on and, refresh your memory with for the 2027 draft. Next.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am Tyler Metcalf. Welcome to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. And today we're taking a look and refreshing our memory on a couple returners. We're going to look at the sophomore shooting guard from the national champion runners-up UConn Huskies, the senior wing forward from Florida, Thomas Haugh. But I really want to start with the senior big man, the absolute monster in the desert, Mo Krivas, listed at 7'2", 260. Krivas was simply one of the most dominant and influential centers in all of college basketball last year. For me, he would have been a first rounder. He probably would have been a top 20 guy. I think he very likely could have been the second center off the board after Adai Mara in the 2026 draft, but Krivas decided that he still had more to work on, that the NIL package that he was offered was too much, and that he had unfinished business at Arizona, who had an incredible year that ended in heartbreak for Wildcat fans. So the fact that Krivas decided to return tells us a lot about the value that he was offered in that NIL deal, but also tells us where the type of effect that he thinks returning could have on his stock. The number one selling point with Krivas is the rebounding and the defense. When he was on the court, he was one of the most impactful and consistent defensive centers in the entire country. The way that he influenced a game was so impressive. The way that he moved his feet in space. Obviously, you don't want him switching out and defending guys on the perimeter, but he was nimble enough where he could show different coverages out of the pick and roll, where he could hedge and recover. He could play a pure drop. He could, sit down in a stance momentarily and defend with a high hand. It was good enough where even though he got pulled out into space, he wasn't a dead man walking. He could at least hold his own and use his size and his strength to disrupt ball handlers and perimeter creators. Even though Krivas was one of the most dominant defensive centers in the country, a lot of his impact came on just his influence, on his positioning, on being in the right spot at the right time, and deterring the offense from doing what they wanted to do. Because like his individual defensive playmaking numbers were pretty basic, like block rate of 7.5, steal rate of 1.6. They're not great. Like if you just look at those as a center, you're probably like, yeah, he's fine. Like not a huge difference. But the big impact comes with what opponents were able to do when he was on the court. Because when Krivas was on the court, Arizona did a really, really phenomenal job of forcing tough mid-range shots and limiting rim attempts, as opponents took 36.8% of their shots in the mid-range, only 25.5% of their shots at the rim, and shot only 47.1% at the rim. Those are really good numbers, and it's an Arizona defensive scheme that is forcing a lot of really inefficient shots because of Krivas's presence out there. Just for context, when Krivas was off the court, those numbers shifted to 28.5% at the rim, 34.2% in the mid-range, 28.5% of their shots in the mid-range instead of 36.8. 34.2% of their shots at the rim instead of 25.5, and opponents shot 57.1% at the rim when Krivas was off the court compared to 47.1%. So there's a 10% efficiency difference there and an almost 10% frequency difference there as well. So it's really clear to see how impactful Krivas was on the court on the defensive end. And going into this year, bringing in guys like Derek Dixon and Caleb Holt on the perimeter, another year of Ivan Kurchenkov as like one of the elite perimeter defenders in the country, Krivas has another opportunity to be yet again one of the most dominant and influential defensive centers in the entire country. I don't expect much of anything to really change on that end of the floor for him because we have multiple years of when he's healthy and out on the court, his presence is always felt. The big question, though, with Krivas is his offense. He was he was really good as a play finisher. He was efficient. He played his role. And 63.8 true shooting percentage, absolute monster on the offensive glass at a 14.4 offensive rebounding rate, had a 70.3 free throw rate. So he drew a ton of fouls, generated a ton of extra possessions, really put a lot of pressure on the defense when he was out there just because of his size and physical an ability to physically impose himself because he's 7'2", 260. So from a physicality standpoint, we know he's going to be ready, NBA ready from day one. And even just like as an interior scorer, interior play finisher, he graded out really well per synergy, 83rd percentile on posts up, 63rd percentile as the roller, 84th percentile on cuts. Those are good marks. Not great. You'd like a couple of those numbers to be a little higher, but they're really, really good. He knows who he is on offense and plays within that role. I'm really curious to see if we see a little more of the passing get unlocked. I don't think he's ever really going to shoot it. Maybe he gets to a Jonas Valanciunas kind of level where it's, one, maybe two attempts a game at moderate efficiency. I don't really care about that. What I really care about is his finishing. Because for someone that big who's around the rim that often, generating that many at rim looks, putting that much pressure on the rim, he just wasn't good enough. On offensive putbacks, Krivas was in just the 18th percentile while shooting 53.2% and shot just 60.8% on layups. Not good enough for a 7'2", 260-pound center. Those numbers are just simply not good enough. And it's weird because he has encouraging shooting, scoring, touch. Like when we look at the free throw indicators, 78% on free throws and a lot of them. So it's weird that the finishing was that inconsistent and that inefficient. And just for comparison, looking at some of the other centers in the 2026 first round, Adai Mara, 92nd percentile on putbacks while shooting 77.8% and then 71.7% on layups. Hannes Steinbeck, 79th percentile on putbacks while shooting 63.8% and 64.9% on layups. Terrace Reed, 65th percentile on offensive putbacks while shooting 62.2% and 63.5% on layups. There's a big difference there, and there shouldn't be. Krivas has good enough touch, and he draws enough fouls where if he can start converting a lot of those offensive putbacks into and one attempts, his point average is going to skyrocket. The amount of pressure that he puts on defenses is going to skyrocket. He's going to continue to get defenders in trouble because of the foul drawing capabilities. So it's a really simple thing. And I think it's mostly mental with him because there are a lot of really good and encouraging touch indicators. I think mentally he just needs to slow down a little bit, and he got in trouble way too frequently with just rushing the process where he did the hard part, he did the dirty work and getting the offensive rebound, carving out space, hunting down those loose balls, and then just rushed the process and wasn't able to finish through contact consistently. So I think once, hopefully going into this year, if he's able to slow down that finishing process from a mental standpoint, use the touch that he's shown in many other areas of his game and convert a lot of those, we're going to see his numbers and his overall offensive impact skyrocket. And he's going to have a really good case for being one of the best and most intriguing big men in the 2027 class. Let's jump over to one of the most interesting and kind of polarizing wings among the returners in Thomas Haugh right after this. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform, from sales and accounting to inventory and marketing. Everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports just like it is in business. Think about your favorite college team, your favorite NBA team, your favorite football team, they're all working towards the same goal. And it's about putting the right pieces in place where obviously talent matters, but having the right processes, having the right fits at each kind of spot and making those crucial decisions so everyone's aligned and working towards the same goal. It's just as important in sports as it is in business. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, jumping down to Florida from Arizona. Now, Thomas Haugh is one of the more I think he's going to be a fascinating player and prospect and honestly narrative to keep an eye on all year because he broke out in a big way 2 years ago when Florida won the national championship, and he was a major part of that. But he was kind of an ancillary player. Guys like Alex Condon, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Elijah Martin, they took up a lot of the attention, especially on the offensive end, which allowed Hauk to play to his strengths, which is defense, rebounding, off ball scoring, off ball play finishing, and playing with a just kind of chaotic energy in a good way that is really perfect for a role player. This last year, Will Richard's gone, Elijah Martin's gone, Walter Clayton's gone. Now, all of the perimeter scoring, all of the perimeter creation is kind of up in those responsibilities are up in the air. And how, who some people, myself included, would have looked at in the first round if he would have came out after that national championship year. Now Hauk is kind of being looked at as taking on a lot of those responsibilities, especially since Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan didn't exactly have the seasons that a lot of us hoped that they would. And I and it led to a lot of really fascinating discussions about Hauk and his inefficiencies because his usage jumped from 18.5 to 21. 21 isn't a massive number, but for someone who has historically been more of the play finisher, not really an on-ball creator, not a consistent shooter, not a dynamic playmaker, it is a substantial jump, especially when that jump it coincides with losing really experienced and reliable and versatile perimeter shooters and scorers like Walter Clayton, like Elijah Martin, like Will Richard. So I think that confluence of events led to how experiencing a pretty dramatic drop off in efficiency across the board. Even though some of his counting numbers were solid, even though some of his impact on winning numbers were still really good because he is still doing all of the little things like rebounding and playing really smart defense, and making all the hustle plays and having really encouraging on off splits and all of that kind of stuff. That core of who he is as a player wasn't there, or excuse me, was still there, but instead it was shifted into being more of a star role, and that just may not be who he is. Because when we look at how he was used, it makes sense that there were some efficiency struggles where his isolation plus pick and roll ball handling possessions rose from 17 to 55, and his dribble jumpers rose from 7 to 41. That change in perimeter scoring and that increase in defensive attention also led to his at rim field goal percentage dropping from 66.1 to 62.2 overall, and 55.7 to 53.8 in the half court. Those are a lot of changes. There are a lot of developments that simply didn't go well. And I do think a lot of it can be chalked up to how just being kind of shoehorned into a role that he isn't necessarily fit for. And that's okay. That's not to say he's a bad player. I think it helps us properly set expectations for his senior year at Florida, for what his draft kind of range will look like in the 2027 draft, and what his translation to the NBA could be. Now, if we're not expecting him to be a wing creator, maybe he takes another leap this year. Maybe that this was just a bumpy year and he's able to learn from it and develop from some of those inconsistencies, and he takes a huge jump in his senior year. That'd be awesome. I hope so. We've seen that from guys a lot in the past. Nick Clifford most recently. And if Howe can do something similar in the SEC, it's going to speak volumes to who he is as a player and what his overall ceiling could be in the NBA. However, I think he's a perfect guy where it's like we have to scout these guys for who they are, not who we want them to be. And for Hauk, even if he's in one of these more perimeter oriented and highly dependent perimeter creator roles, it's not going to shock me if we see a lot more of these inconsistencies. But as long as we continue to see a lot of the really good defensive stuff, a lot of the really good rebounding, slashing, rim pressure, cutting, all of that kind of stuff as well, I'm not worried about him. And I think he could be a massive steal at the end of the first round because guys who play like that, especially when you surround them with other stars, Hauk is going to do the dirty work. He did it when he was a role player. He did it when he was a star. I have zero hesitations about him doing that kind of stuff. And if you're able to put that kind of guy in a rotation, he is the exact type of guy who makes life so much easier for your established stars. And if you're a playoff team and you can insert 6'7", 6'8" type of wing with his athleticism, with his chaotic, again, compliment, energy and defensive versatility and rebounding and off-ball scoring, and take away all of the creation responsibilities that he had at Florida this last year, I think you're going to get a really good player who's going to help winning in a big, big way. Think of guys like Tumani Kamara with Portland, how crucial he's been to their kind of steady rebuild, the defensive versatility, knowing who he is on offense and playing to those strengths and not trying to do too much. Self-awareness is an incredible strength, and I think Thomas Hauk is one of those guys who absolutely has it. Someone else who knows exactly who they are on the basketball court is Braylon Mullins, who we'll get to right after this. So I was really, really shocked when Braylon Mullins withdrew from this last draft. I thought he would have been a lock for a first rounder, just like I thought Krivas and Hauk would have been as well. But I do think that he's also going to be able to improve his draft stock pretty substantially this year by going back. Last year at UConn, he kind of struggled early on, just with an injury that kind of derailed the start to his season. And that led to him not really getting utilized, I think, in the best way. He felt like one of these guys who was billed as a shooter, and that's all UConn used him as. Whereas in high school, he had a little bit more stuff to his game with his athleticism and his off-ball cutting and his ability to get downhill, to get to the rim, finish above the rim. And at UConn, it was just shoot. Like that's it. Like we're not asking you to get to the rim. We're not going to look for you on cuts. The second you catch that ball, you're putting it up. It was really reminiscent of like Isaiah Evans's freshman year at Duke, where you're a shooter, and that's all we're using you for. Now, whenever a guy gets billed as just a shooter, quote unquote, just a shooter, and their 3-point percentage isn't outlandish, it's a tough look because Mullins only shot 33.5% from three, but we know he's a better shooter than that. That's more of a reflection of the volume of shots he was taking and the difficulty level of shots that he was taking, because he was pulling from 25 plus. He was comfortably launching from NBA range, spotting up off of movement, off of pull-ups in transition. There wasn't much of a filter there. Now the shot selection needs to get a little tighter, but it felt, the way that he played, it felt very much like he had a clear directive of go shoot the ball. You are our number one floor spacer, and we're not asking of much else of anything from you on the offensive end other than knock down these off-ball threes. And he did. But from an NBA standpoint, it didn't really allow him to showcase much more in his game. He was incredibly low volume at the rim, like single-digit percentile ranking in terms of at-rim shot frequency. Now, some of that was due to teammates never really looking for him on back cuts. And another one was anytime he attacked a closeout, it turned into a pull-up three. And he never really looked to get downhill, to attack the rim, to use his athleticism in a positive way. This year, I hope we see a massive, massive change in that, because he is a really good off-ball mover. The way that he can free himself up, running off of screens, using his shooting gravity to set up back cuts, I think another year in this system should lead to really substantial increase in his off-ball rim pressure. He's not going to be one of these guys that's out there breaking down defenders with his handle or being a primary playmaker. Probably not. It'd be a fun development. I guess never say never, but that's probably not who he is. But he doesn't need to be, because as long as he's a little more integrated into their offensive system, which can be really complex and take a while to learn and requires a lot of chemistry between teammates out there. If they use him as the off-ball mover that he was last year, but instead incorporate a lot more back cuts and using that shooting gravity to really set up stuff at the rim, I think we're going to see a much more dynamic and versatile off-ball scorer. What gets me really excited about Braylon Mullins, though, is his defense. Like, this dude is a nasty defender. He moves his feet well. He's super confident. He's got a ton of versatility. And as long as he just gets a little stronger, which, good news, almost every teenager ever has, he's going to be really, really good. And the fact that he had a block rate over 2.5 and a steal rate over 2 this last year is incredibly impressive for a freshman who, again, is labeled frequently as, quote unquote, just a shooter. Braylon Mullins is so much more than that. And if he would have stayed in the 2026 class, I think he would have been the number 1 3-and-D wing off the board. That ended up being Cam Carr. We saw how thin that archetype was this last year, and how guys like Cam Carr and Isaiah Evans kind of fell a little bit because of their slender frame. A similar thing very easily could have happened to Mullins, but I think a playoff team would have been getting an absolute steal, even if he would have gone in the 20s as opposed to the lottery, where I think he probably would have gone. But if he comes back this year in his sophomore season at UConn with a little more strength, showcasing a little more physicality, or at least ability to withstand physicality, because he doesn't shy away from contact. He's not contact averse. He's tough. He plays through contact. He's not afraid of it, of initiating contact on defense. But if he can showcase that he can hold his ground a little more than he did last year, while still showcasing the really high level of feel and defensive fundamentals that he did as well, while also shooting like we expect him to shoot, high 30s at least from 3, and a lot more back cuts, a lot more at rim pressure, and off-ball scoring versatility, I think Braylon Mullins is yet again going to be in the running for one of, if not the most intriguing 3-and-D off-ball scoring, off-ball shooting wings in the country, because his combination of defense, athleticism, and shooting, it's not overly common. We get guys who are really good at one or two of those things and then just at another. And Braylon Mullins has the chance to come out and showcase that he is absolutely elite at all 3 of those. And I'd be a really, really awesome foundational start for him, proving that he is going to be a top 10 pick in the 2027 NBA draft. All right. So those are 3 of, I think, the most intriguing and crucial returning players for this year. Mo Krivas at Arizona, who I think has a really good chance of being the top center in this class, or at least one of them. Braylon Mullins, who has a really good chance of being one of the top 3-and-D wings, and then Thomas Haugh, who has a really good chance of being just one of the most highly rated, versatile Swiss Army knife type of physical wing forwards in this class. They're going to be on 3 very good teams: UConn, Arizona, Florida. They're going to rock yet again. So you're going to be able to watch a ton of them. Keep an eye out for them. But that's where we're going to end it. I'm Tyler Metcalf. You can follow me at TMetcalf11. Thank you for listening to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings and making us your first listen every day.